It's been a crazy last year, I'm trying to process still. I don't even know how I should feel. I got a couple big houses and some wish, maybe 3. And I got family members that got bigger egos than me. And I got fans around the world whenever I'm overseas. And I got friends who just pretend and say they love everything. And yes, I fell in love again, I thought that shit was impossible. And I promise it's too real for me to care what they think. I promise I don't give a fuck because I know who I am. Hating on me undercover, I just won't understand. Say we're brothers, call me family, bitch, you act like a fan. 2 a.m. in Atlanta, screaming, baby, I'm back. Play me like a fool, I see. But it's been so long since I thought about you. I swear, okay, baby, I'm back. I guess you weren't the one for me. But it's been so long since I thought about you. I swear, okay, baby, I'm back. I told my baby, let them talk, that's the caption. I don't even really like being online, that shit texting. Started off as an attraction, now it's turned into attachment. Overseas, we relaxing, I ain't think about the past tense. Now everybody wanna say shit, all of a sudden y'all believe in me. All of a sudden you want a favor now, all of a sudden you want to be with me. All of a sudden y'all always knew, I remember you ain't see it in me. And yes, I know I'm blessed, but sometimes I wish I could go back to the way it used to be, just so I could feel what I've been missing. You could have it all, you see, but there's still something, it's not the same about you.
All right, I'm back. I'm back, guys. So, and yes, I want to say for chat, because of the music selection is almost blatantly because I haven't streamed in a while, and so it just seemed fitting. I will say I'm not really a hip-hop fan, as Dakota pointed out in the chat, and I here's what I'll say. I feel like I'm very I don't know, genre music. Like, there's like, I would say my favorite genre is pop, okay? I have very white girl taste, I won't lie. But at the same time, I do appreciate, rock. I appreciate parts of country. I appreciate some of, hip-hop. But, yeah. Also, hi, guys. Hi, Dakota. Hi, Jacob. I don't know if you did make the stream or not, but hi to you as well. I saw your comment before I went live. Hi, Random. How are you? Hi, Crab. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the POV issues with the books. Something me and JC have talked about, I would say a lot. I feel like every time we talk about Winds of Winter, we kind of talk about this subject because there is kind of a POV issue in terms of just the pacing of the story, where certain POVs are in terms of their development and how close we think they are to actually getting to where they need to be by the end of Winds of Winter, if we're working on the idea that there are only 2 books left in the series, if we ever get them. And another part of that is you think about how many there are, right? So there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it. JC, I do like Taylor Swift, yes. I wouldn't say I don't love her personally, but I like her music. She has a very good voice. Yes, I have a lot of hair, just in general. It's something I inherited from my grandfather on my mother's side. I will say, I'm not as much Sabrina Carpenter. Like, everybody likes Sabrina Carpenter. I think she's okay. Like, I think her music's all right. I like Tate McCree more. That's who I like a lot right now. If you're going off of, white girl pop music, that's what I like more. finally back on a Grease stream after almost a year. Well, welcome back. Do you think Aaron needed to be a POV? I kind of think not, but he has two of the best chapters in the series, including the Forsaken. Yeah, his 3-chapter run is one of the best of the entire series. You just think about his first chapter, which I think is really underrated. When you go back and read it, it's a great introduction into the Iron Island plotline. But yeah, and then his second chapter is literally the best of A Feast for Crows. His Winds of Winter sample chapter, I think, is the best Winds of Winter sample chapter, one of the best chapters of the series, some of George R. R. Martin's best writing. One of the reasons why we need Winds of Winter, because some of his best content is hiding behind that locked door at the moment. But I think that we, to an extent, needed at least one Greyjoy POV outside of Asha and Theon, because the problem is, if Asha is our only POV or whatnot for the Greyjoys, it doesn't really flow that well, because Asha is not currently, on the Iron Islands where things, is at the beginning of the story. And so if you really want to go there, if anything, maybe you need to remove Victarion or Aeron, but even then, I feel like they're both very vital to the Greyjoy plotline, and they provide interesting aspects to the culture. So I really don't feel like the Ironborn plot is necessarily the issue, and we're going to talk about it because I did do a video for this week that talked about Aeron's POV specifically, and I think Euron's plotline specifically is so interesting because if Aeron, we're suspecting he's going to die in his second chapter of A Winds of Winter, right? So the first chapter being the Forsaken, the second being likely a battle with this Red Wine Hightower fleet. Also, I've been kind of putting out some stuff that I thought was believed to be true, but I don't think so now, because after rereading the Forsaken chapter, I had always thought it was more like we have a Hightower fleet and then a Red Wine fleet. It seems more implied in the Forsaken chapter that those fleets are going to try and meet up to then attack Euron, which would make a lot more sense in my opinion. And that maybe Euron, because we also don't know his exact position. We know he's left the Shields, but we don't know how far south he truly is in the Forsaken chapter, in my opinion. So it's very unclear, can he reach the Hightower fleet before the Red Wine fleet gets there? Can he kind of do what Robert did, where he takes on one, army and then takes on the other one before they can get all their strength together? Still unclear at this point of the story. So I would likely think, though, that Aeron will die in the second chapter. I mean, he's extremely starved. Malnutrition is, he might die of just natural causes here in a little while. Or, the other part of it just being he's strapped to Euron's ship on the prow. He's in a prime position to die in the next chapter. So if that's the case, if he dies in this next battle as part of this big blood sacrifice that we see with all these different, people being sacrificed, warlocks and septons, all that stuff, who then takes the Euron POV? Who is our look into Euron? Because the thing that you would think about is, well, Euron is being prompted as our next big bad of the series. The Boltons seem to be on the decline. You look at Littlefinger, I think all of us expect he's going to probably die at some point from Sansa. So who is the next big bad outside of the others? And that seems to be Euron. But if Aeron dies, we don't really have anybody giving us this look into Euron, which is something we desperately needed with the Forsaken chapter, because yes, we do see Euron, but a lot of the time it's more of a performance. It's other people's viewing how he's talking in front of people, like the Kingsmoot, or with Victarion giving speeches to his men after the Shield stuff. We don't really get to see deep inside of him outside of really two kind of moments, right? One with Victarion when he's being ordered to go get Daenerys, and then the other being in the Forsaken chapter. It feels weird then if we would just cut away from his plotline until probably Samwell becomes the POV for Euron. But then the issue becomes, if Samwell is supposed to help with maybe some reveals that he finds out at, Old Town and is destined to go back north, well then he can't really stay with Euron all that long, you'd have to assume. And so Euron, taking Old Town, which I think a lot of people think is going to happen to some extent, whether it's sacked, he takes control of it for a certain amount of time. somewhere in there, Euron and Samwell have to part. And then so the next idea would be, okay, well, the next look into Euron is likely going to be Cersei. Cersei could be the queen. There's a lot of potential gain from marrying Cersei for Euron. If he can't get Daenerys, Cersei is a pretty good candidate. You can maybe tie the West to yourself. He's already has his power base in the West, so it just makes sense to gain more power there. So my issue then becomes, okay, well, how do we get to all these things aligning, right? Because we think that Cersei likely wouldn't make it to Casterly Rock until kind of the end of Winds of Winter or more towards Dream Spring. There's just not a lot there for a POV like Euron to exist, because you've already set up one of them to be killed and the other one we know can't be with Euron for a substantial amount of time. So that's kind of the issue, right? Like, it's not that we just have a POV issue in terms of there's so many and they're all spread across everywhere. It's that even the ones we do have, how do you limit them down, but also then have a POV for a character we need to have a POV? So I think that's a bit of a problem that we're going to discuss in the stream. But I also want to talk about, in other words, I didn't really do a video for it, didn't do a stream for it, but George R. R. Martin kind of came out and said his, normal stuff where talking about Winds of Winter. So I figured I would read out the quote for you guys, just if you haven't heard. But in a recent interview, he gave another, update or window into his life, into Winds of Winter. He says that that's the curse of my life. There's no doubt Winds of Winter is 13 years late. I'm still working on it. I have periods where I make progress, and then other things divert my attention, and suddenly I have a deadline for one of the HBO shows. I have something else to do. Now, what I think is really hilarious is because we get this quote, right? But then we also see George R. R. Martin replying to Trey, another A Song of Ice and Fire creator, and he had made a joke about like the direwolf stuff and how we've gotten real life direwolves, before Winds of Winter. And I don't really think that was meant to be serious. It was like a joke. It's something that's crazy, right? You would have never expected that to happen. And George actually responded to that, and he really was, it was really out of context. The person asking George didn't really, I think George misunderstood it. I don't think it was meant to be like George was purposefully being antagonistic, but it's like, his then explanation is, oh, well, just because I have these things like going to resurrect the direwolves and all that stuff, that isn't something that really impacts Winds of Winter at all. But then in another question, he then states, oh yeah, things outside of Winds of Winter are delaying him as well. So it's like, that's the things that I think is so frustrating as, a person really wanting this book to come out, the community, is that he counteracts himself all the time. It's not that we're getting one big thing that's really pushing George away from Winds of Winter. It's multiple little things. It's things like the Direwolves. It's things like House of the Dragon. It's a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms show. It's all these other things that he's trying to make show-wise or movie-wise, or it's other writing that he's involved with, or other games he's involved with. It's all these little things that maybe don't take up a ton of time in a vacuum of it, right, individually, but you put them all together and the book's not getting written. We've gotten no updates of any chapters being done, any characters being completed like we used to see maybe back a couple years ago. That's the frustration. And so again, this update isn't really anything crazy to me. This is what I expect. Winds of Winter is not close to being finished. He's confirmed that multiple times. So again, that's kind of what I wanted to say on that. There's not a whole lot that I think needs to be said. George has made no real further progress on Winds. It's not close to being out. And let me get back to chat a little bit, because I kind of yapped by myself for a little while. Damphair is one of the acceptable Ironborn. I've definitely grown a liking to Aeron as I've reread the story. I agree, Christian. And that's what I think is interesting, is like, maybe we're getting pump faked with Aeron dying. Maybe Euron is kind of playing with Aeron, that he doesn't, intend for Aeron to actually die. He wants him to stay alive to witness everything he's going to do and to continue psychologically torturing his brother. But I don't know. I don't know if that really is the case. I mean, there's a lot of evidence for the contrary. I've always read it as the Hightower fleet and Redwine fleet will try to catch Euron in a pincer maneuver. See, that's what I've always thought as well, JC, but I reread the Forsaken chapter, and it just doesn't feel like that. And you also think about where currently, Euron could be at. Because you think about where the Red Wine Fleet is. The Red Wine Fleet in the Forsaken chapter is coming around Dorne. Like, it's at the very southern tip. It's, like, about to be coming into, like, the area of the Reach is what I kind of came around with it. And so if Euron is also going to be attacked by the Hightower Fleet, because they've been emboldened by the Red Wine Fleet coming back, those fleets are pretty close to each other already. So if Euron was to be caught in the middle of them, he'd have to be, like, somewhere in between, like, the mountains of Dorne, where probably the Red Wine Fleet is, and then also, where Old Town is, right? I don't know. It's hard to really narrow down. Since I'm here, that means Ashley won't be. Well, she usually comes a little later, so. Hi, Cannibal. How are you? The curse of my life. The curse that made George a 9-figure millionaire. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do think, though, if you're George, I understand from this point of view that George is frustrated that he can't get the book done. He's obviously having issues with it, and it is something that's going to define his legacy. It does not matter what George does the rest of his life. If he does not complete Winds of Winter, does not complete A Dream of Spring, his legacy will always be as the writer who couldn't finish his story. So, I have sympathy for him, but I do think that he should just take it more seriously. I mean, give himself every opportunity to finish the book, right? Give people, have more people that are involved with the writing process in terms of giving him ideas or helping him and giving him suggestions, a team of people that can help bounce ideas of how to get from this point to that point in the story that George is stuck on right now. Not to necessarily write the story. I think George, if we get Winds of Winter, if we get the conclusion of the series, it should be through George, his own writing, and all of that. I'm not one of those people that really enjoy the idea of somebody else writing, even with George R. R. Martin's, tutelage or him hovering over that, because then you run into the same situation of something like Ryan Condal, where it's like it can start out good, but it's somebody else writing it. So I personally think that George should just get a bigger team for the writing process to help bounce ideas and to help, set deadlines, right? If you have a team around you, you have to have meetings, you have to do this, progress discussions. It just becomes more of a focal point of, his life. I think that Red Team Review and Preston, they talked about this issue with Trey on this exact idea, and I think they had a really good discussion on it. So I check out their video. I think they bring a good, points to how George could finish the book. He says he's not ringing up the register, but he still took time to open these businesses. I also imagine he has to take time to keep an eye on each of them and figure finances. Agreed. Again, it's not that these are his main priority. It's that let's say George, 100% of George's time, right? You then have businesses he's involved with and other projects. It's all of these things that are maybe taking 5% of his time. Well, all these things are building up, right? It's 5% here, 5% there, 5% there. Maybe at this point, he has to have a lot of focus on something. It's a lot of that idea. We're not seeing wins until 2030 at minimum. That's where I'm at as well. I think that I've been a bit more positive until, especially recently on the series, because, there was that room where George hasn't been telling us much about it. And so maybe given what he's already told us publicly on his progress, that he maybe is closer than we think he was, but this tells me he's not even close. Yeah, no good George news, Brownie, unfortunately. Hi, Zeno, how are you? Honestly, we will get Winds of Winter in some shape or form, but it probably won't be in a form we would like. Yeah, I agree. I think that either we'll see Winds of Winter for whatever he has at some point. Whether it's in his lifetime and he just finally gives up and gives us whatever he has, or it's later on when the publishers, come asking and money talks. So eventually we're going to get it, is probably what I'll say. I would say we'll get at least whatever he has by 2040, more than likely. I know that's wild to say. I'll be 40 years old by that point, but we'll at least get it at some point. Um, when you do so many side quests in RPG, the main story is boring to you. It can almost get to the point where it's like you've lost focus on what's actually happening in the main story. I think that's a great analogy, Dakota. I don't enjoy the idea of someone writing, but I feel it'd be the realistic outcome. I don't know. Like I think that if the series is ever going to get completed, it probably will be somebody else writing it. But I don't think I'd want the conclusion of the story if it's written by somebody else. We've already gotten that with Game of Thrones. It didn't go well. Now, are there really talented writers out there that George could look to? Yes. Will they live up to George's own writing? I highly doubt it, because I think George is one of the best writers probably ever. Random stuff. That's basically how I feel about having to probably do a 25 days of Winds of Winter for probably at least 8 years and trying to figure out how to make ideas that are not the same things over and over again. Yeah, 2040 could literally be that. It could literally be that. What do you think about Preston Jacobs fanfic? I personally like it, but Preston also believes that Quentin is still alive. So I have not listened or read Preston Jacobs fanfic. I know he puts a lot of effort into those, so I give him a lot of credit for even attempting it. So, you know, I don't know. I have differing ideas from Preston in certain things, so I'm not sure how I would take it in terms of his fanfic, but I do want to read it at some point. I just haven't found the time to. And I know people have asked me about the fanfic for like since he started it, that I've been on YouTube, and I just haven't really gotten to it. I love that we call him George like we know him. Well, I mean, we've read his books, which is in a lot of ways a reflection of George himself and a lot of the things that he struggled with, his, things that are at the front of his mind. So it feels like you do know George in a way, but yeah. So getting back then to the POV issues, I kind of want to go away from the Winds of Winter stuff that George came out with, because I feel like we talk about that stuff all the time. It's not new information. It's just news. That's what it is. It's news, but it's not anything really new. But looking at like the POV issue, and so me and JC, we talked about this a lot, and we will probably talk about this very soon in the future. But if you look at like certain POVs, so like Daenerys, for instance, in my opinion, Daenerys, her plot line is the farthest behind of any plot line right now in the book. Because if you look at certain plot lines, like Young Griff's plotline, like John Conn's plotline, right? That plotline you could theoretically do in less than probably 8 chapters, right? You have your first chapter, which is, well, I guess if you want to throw Arianne in there, it'd be more than that, but you think about it, it's okay. You have one chapter where it's you meet Young Griff, you meet John Conn with Arianne after we've already seen her sample chapter. So I guess at this point you could say 3 chapters, right? That third chapter probably is going to tell us how they took Storm's End. A fourth chapter, maybe in between, which is some build up to Mace Tyrell arriving. A fifth chapter, which is then Mace Tyrell arrives, all that stuff, whatever happens there. The sixth chapter, maybe it's a journey chapter to King's Landing. So maybe we see just a kind of a build up to that. Seventh chapter could easily be the taking of King's Landing. And then maybe you see an eighth, ninth, that of them establishing rulership. Aegon is, crowned the king, all that stuff. Like, that is how many chapters that realistically, if you condensed it down to, that could be a plot line. Daenerys, I genuinely think, needs at least 15 chapters at the bare minimum to get to where she needs to be. And that's not including the other POVs that are in Meereen. So, like, you just think about that. Like, think about the journey that Daenerys needs to go on. We have to be reintroduced into her into Winds of Winter, where she's been captured by the Dothraki. Let's say she's with the Dothraki, and then we need to travel to wherever she's going to go. Also meeting whoever she needs to meet, making a plan or building up a plan in which Daenerys is going to take control of the Dothraki, executing that plan. A fifth chapter of traveling back to Meereen, maybe. That one could take 1 or 2 chapters. Her then getting to Meereen, introducing these people, which we might see through other POVs as well. Like, her then establishing what is going to remain in Slaver's Bay, like her laws, who's going to rule. That right there is a good amount of stuff, because Daenerys didn't even figure that out in book 5. So how is she going to figure that out here? You then have to figure out, okay, how many POVs are we going to see her of going to, whether you think it's a Shy, whether you think it's to Pentos, whether you think it's to any of these other free cities or any of these cities in Essos that you think that she still has loose ends with. And then possibly at the very end of the chapter, it should be her journey, or very end of the book, journeying to Dragonstone. I mean, like, that, think about the difference right there. Like, think about how far behind Daenerys is behind a plotline like Young Griff, like the Euron plotline. Like, she is just so far behind. And that's kind of the issue of, I think, the POVs, is not only that we have too many of them, it's that some of them are further forward in the story than others. If we don't get wins before 24 or 2040, I'll just go with my headcanon that Stannis wins the Battle of Ice, then a dimensional rift pops up, and all the Stannermen from our world get transported to Westeros. That's a good one. He has mentioned nothing on Bran or Jon, so it might be the wall stuff that's tripping him up. Dany is pretty far behind too. Yeah, I think that's a really big point. I think especially Bran. Because Bran, you have to think, has to be south of the wall, probably around 3/4 of the way through the book. So how do you do that, right? You gotta think we're at least gonna see him at the wall, or not at the wall, in Bloodraven's cave for at least half the book. I mean, he just arrived in Dance. Now, yes, there's a huge time gap, right? There's going to be half a book of Dance, and then he comes back and wins. There's going to be a good amount of time it's going to skip. So he has probably learned and things like that. But I just feel like there is still at least 3 or 4 more chapters that have to happen. And you're assuming one of those chapters also has to be probably the hold the door stuff, or, the others finding Bran to some extent that pushes them to go south. And then you have at least another 1 to 2 chapters probably journeying to the wall, because the idea is that Bran has to be at the wall or south of it by the time the wall comes down, which likely will be the very end of the book. And so it just makes sense that he would arrive right before that happens. So 3/4 of the way through the book. You just think about, how do you execute that? Bran is a POV that's going to be learning all this different knowledge. Will he even be a POV once he leaves Bloodraven's cave? I mean, he has to kind of be, right? Or we don't understand how he gets to the wall. So you think maybe when he gets to the wall, that's when he stops being a POV, maybe? That's where I look at it and I go, yeah, George has promised no new POVs, but it makes so much sense if Bran was to stop being a POV after they leave Bloodraven's cave and Mira becomes like a POV for just this book. Like, she disappears. She maybe has 1 or 2 chapters in this book to get, Bran to the wall and all that stuff, and then she fades out of the story. I just don't... There's so much there, right? And then you also have to look at, okay, Jon. So the Jon plotline, I think the North plotline in general is tough because, like I've talked about in the past, it seems like George wants Stannis to burn Shireen. Logistically right now, that makes 0 sense. That makes 0 sense how that plot point could be executed given the timing of events and where we're at in the story right now. Because in that way, right, in some version of this, the Northern plotline has to go one of like 3 ways. The first way is Stannis conquers the Boltons relatively quickly, enough to where he can then send a messenger to have Shireen brought to Winterfell, or he goes to the wall. That's the first one. The second one is Stannis gets defeated by the Boltons and then retreats to the wall. I really don't like this one at all, as you guys can kind of tell the way I'm describing it. So, or Stannis just retreats. Either he retreats, or he is basically loses and is forced to retreat. And then the third option is, I don't even remember the third option. I think I combined what I have originally had for the third option as the second one, but whatever. So yeah, it's like, how does that work, right? Because you got to think the Stannis plotline with the Boltons is something that should last a good portion of the book. Like, yes, the Battle of Ice is going to happen very early on in that first quarter of the book, but that's not the battle with the Boltons, right? You then have to prepare how are you going to take Winterfell? That should take another chapter or two, right? And then this is if they take Winterfell, if Stannis takes Winterfell. And then you would have a situation in which you've conquered Winterfell. You then can send a messenger to have Shireen and co come to Winterfell. At this point, Jon's probably resurrected, so Jon and Mel then go to Winterfell. It's a whole situation right now where it's just like, how do these plot points all add up to where everybody is in their place that they need to be by the end of the story? I think George probably understands where all these characters need to end up by the end of the book, but it's how do we get there with the pages that he is limiting himself to, with only having 2 books left in the series, and also how do they all add up in the way that he can write it that way? Like, that's where I think he's at. I think he might be rethinking some of the plot points that he had made and wondering if he can even pull them off. Also, shout out to Dakota for now having the Baratheon thing for being a member. That's pretty cool. I think George should drop the idea of 7 books. There's so much to cover. I agree. I think that if he gave himself an extra book, it would drastically help. Now, I know people have very differing opinions on how to do that. And some people have suggested, like I think Quinn the GM suggested that we should do a Westeros book and an Essos book. I don't think that works because you have to remember George has to, for the first book anyway, he has to have what POVs he has done and written for that first book. So if we did like an Essos book for the first one, he'd have to have Daenerys' plot all the way written through, which I don't think he does. I think he has a lot of probably the Marine stuff maybe written through, or at least stuff like Tyrion, for instance, and I think Arya he probably has done. But for other POVs, he doesn't. So I think that wouldn't work, in my opinion. I think what would work would be a situation where George gives us the POVs that he has, for the most part, concluded that relate to each other. So I think POVs he could very easily do. I think he could do Arya. I think he could do Jaime and Brienne's stuff. I think he could do Cersei. I think he could do Young Griff. Like, I think a lot of the main Westeros ones he could probably do. I think the ones that he would have to save, it would almost in a lot of ways kind of be like how Dance of the Dragons is, you know, the North plus Essos. I think he would have to do that again. That's how I think he would have to probably do that. Some have a lot of things to do before they get done with things. Like Dany has to free all the slaves in Volantis and Penta. Yeah. I agree. There's just a lot to do. Bran sucks. Well, Bran, he's getting better. He gets better as the books go on. I will say that. Hi, Kara. How are you? If George ever reached out to Preston Jacobs, I bet both of them together could pop out the next books rather quickly. See, I think so. The only issue would be George, I think, and Preston have different interpretations of things. It's not confirmed, right? But like, for instance, Preston has Quentin alive. Well, what if George has Quentin as dead? Like, it would kind of shift some of the story stuff. But I do think like Preston's a very smart individual. Like, he could definitely really help George's process. Yeah, I think Mira will be the POV once Bran is fully the three-eyed raven. Yeah, I think that could really work, Kara, but it's like George has said, we're not getting any more POVs. So that's my issue, is like, I think that George, in a lot of ways, saying that has maybe hurt some of the things he could do, because making new POVs could actually help things, as long as they're not like making a whole new storyline. That's the issue with the POVs, is that Feast for Crows and Dance has a lot of new POVs, and they make the story get a lot bigger when the story needed to get smaller again. It needs to get back to where it was in a Game of Thrones, where you only really have 3 or 4 different settings, right? But they're all kind of involving each other. Instead, he's gone the opposite route. So now that the story is as big as it's ever been, how do you get it down to where you have maybe like a Daenerys plotline, a King's Landing plotline, a Euron plotline, maybe the North plotline? Like how do you get that all figured out again? And that's the issue in a lot of ways. That would be cool. I would love George to finish the books. I want George to finish the books, cement his legacy as the best writer for fantasy of all time. if this is how I'll say it, if he finishes the books in a satisfying way that at least continues the quality of the main series books, I think he will be the best fantasy writer of all time. That's asking a lot, though. He has to finish those 2 books. He'd have to have them be really good. Because as of right now, I still have Tolkien over him because Tolkien finished his work, and it's just fantastic. George R. R. Martin just hasn't finished it, so you can't really compare the two. And they're also very different books, but they are still fantasy. But, you know. Also, Dakota, you spoke too soon because Ashley got here. I did see that. Well, Daniel, he could be rethinking it, but not actually doing it. That could be something, Daniel, that's preventing him from writing. Stannis couldn't logically lose the current battle and have the story continue. I can see him lose the campaign later, though. Yeah, man, it's like, that's why I really don't like the idea of, oh yeah, he loses the Battle of Ice and then retreats, because that would go against everything that's been foreshadowed in the story so far. Everything points to the idea that Stannis is going to win the Battle of Ice. If you want to know why I think that, you can check out my videos on the Battle of Ice, especially the more newer ones. Those ones I put a lot of effort into. Or you can watch other great, content creators. A lot of them have made great ideas on the Battle of Ice and some of the theories about it. Stannis, in my opinion, losing the Battle of Ice would be like just wild to me. It'd be like, this is how I look at it. The Red Wedding, right? It's something that's like established and it feels completely earned. It's a plot twist that is right there in front of you. That's how the Battle of Ice feels. Like, it feels like, okay, everything's kind of built up throughout Dance that, yeah, Stannis is probably going to win this first battle, but how is he going to take Winterfell? How is this going to solve his issues of he needs food and they're freezing to death? Like, he's going to win the Battle of Ice, but does that mean he wins, the Battle of the North? So, yeah, I agree with you, though, Mats. Also, hi, Ashley. Also, Dakota, you are the longest member on the channel and the first to ever get the Baratheon one. I don't like the split region thing. Yeah, I'm not huge into that either. I don't know. Because this is my issue, right? Say George released the book Winds of Winter right now, and it was just the Essos plotlines. Could you imagine you've waited, let's say it's 14, 15 years when that happens. Let's just go with 15 years. You've waited 15 years for this book to come out. And it doesn't have the Battle of Ice. It doesn't have the battle for Storm's End and all that stuff. It has the Daenerys plotline and some of the Essos plotlines, which I think are going to be way better in the next book. Don't get me wrong. But of all the plotlines, it's the ones people don't really, I don't think, are as interested in. So that's my other issue, is like, you got to remember the amount of pressure George has on these books to be so good. So I don't know. George also said the Winds of Winter would be out a decade ago. You are correct. Do you think that Daenerys will end up going to Asshai? It was pushed so much in the first 2 books. I get so pumped for it. Yeah, I do agree that there is a lot of foreshadowing of going to Asshai. I just don't see how we go to Asshai. We just have no time for it. We have no time to go to Asshai, right? And even if you want to say, well, the world is round and that, so Daenerys is going to go to the Far East, so that she comes out on the western side of Westeros. Could you imagine we just, in the middle of Daenerys' arc, have an arc where she's like discovering the unknown sea routes and stuff? Like, she's having her own Alyssa Farman like plot line? No, that cannot happen. There's no chance that happens. So I just don't see her going to Asshai. I think she has to start going west, not east. But we'll see. Hi, Devorlin. How are you? I'd rather him expand the series and struggle to fit everything into 2 books. I agree, Oswin. I agree. Let's get a Darkstar novella. Well, Ashley will be a big fan of that. I doubt even if George finishes the books, Tolkien will always be #1. Lord of the Rings movies are way better than the Game of Thrones show. Yeah, I mean, I agree. The Lord of the Rings movies are the greatest movies of all time. That is my conclusion, but Fellowship of the Ring will always be the best movie of all time, in my opinion. But I think the books are a different story. I think the books, I love a lot of what, again, I don't want to compare the two because they're not really comparable. They're very different, right? Like, they're on polar opposites of the fantasy genre, whereas a lot of what Tolkien does is more like of a high fantasy, whereas George is more like a nitty gritty, like dark fantasy. So they're not really comparable, but what I think the two, like in their own separate lanes, they are the best of their lanes. So I don't know, but if you want to say best fantasy, like I would probably give it to George if the next two books are as good, or at least are on pace of the other books. That's how I would say. George's legacy will be forever tainted if the books aren't finished. No one will lay flowers at his grave. I wouldn't go that far, Mats, but I do think George's legacy would be pretty, like, his legacy would probably fade out, whereas Tolkien's will never. Oh, Dvorlin, you're gonna start a war with Ashley. We'll see how that goes. Dvorlin, you were my first Patreon, so shout out to you. I appreciate you as always. You know what? I'm not sure who was my first member on YouTube. Now that would be a very interesting question. I actually don't know. I know who my favorite. Dvorlin, you were my first Patreon. I don't know who my first member ever was. That would be a very interesting question, though. I kind of lost where I was in chat. Also, hi, Ghost. How are you? Yeah, I haven't streamed much. I did like 2 streams in 1 week, but outside of that, I haven't streamed all that much last like month or 2, really. I had a lot of more free time this week, which is kind of because school is starting to wind down. I really just have projects left, so I actually don't have a lot of in-person class, which is very nice for me. But yeah. I think Stannis will access Winterfell by sneaking into those secret passages within the walls. That's a really good idea, Ashley. I definitely think that could happen. Having a shy character go to Daenerys instead, Matt, so that makes a lot of sense. That's why I think possibly somebody like Mel could also end up with Daenerys. George R. R. Martin says we're not going to a shy. Oh, really, Dvorlin? When did he say that? Because I would love to actually look into that. I would love a Mel flashback. That would be really cool. That would be really cool. I'd love to see that. I want more Mel. I really like Mel POVs, but we'll see. Dakota says that The Lord of the Rings are not even in his top 20 favorite movies. You know, everybody is allowed to have their first opinion, but sometimes your opinion's wrong. Grease, you have to read First Law. I just finished reading it like 2 to 3 weeks ago, and it's amazing. You'll love it. Okay. What is that? What's it about? Let me look it up real quick. Well, what's that about? First Law. Why did I type in First Law and then Google said, oh yeah, you want to know the first law of thermodynamics? No, I do not. The First Law, okay, is a fantasy series written by British author Joe Abercrombie. Okay. Interesting. I'll look into that later, but interesting. Very interesting. I could definitely see that, guys. I think if she goes to a shy, it'll have to be something other than physically going there. I agree. Even if George was to wrap it up, I feel like what's done is done. I don't think the series will be remembered in a good way. I disagree. It's all about what have you given me lately. Like, this is the thing that I think bothers me is like, you know, God forbid if George was to die tomorrow, right? I already know what the outcry would be. He didn't finish his story and all this stuff. And I do want to like take a step back and go, you know, George has still given us some of the best written material I've ever read, right? Like these 5 books, Fire and Blood, and then also, you know, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, is very close to my heart. You know, they very much impacted my life. And so I appreciate a lot of things about George, but it is a lot about what have you given lately? And so if George did finish the series in a bang and it was great, I think that people will remember him much better. Oh boy. Oh boy. Ashley and Devorlin are about to start throwing hands in chat. Oh, we have some Lord of the Rings haters in chat right now. Ugh. Kara, that's a fair opinion. You can say Lord of the Rings is boring. You can have that opinion, but you're just wrong. It just you can have your opinion, but your opinion is wrong. That is that. If I was going to have like a punchline to this channel, it'd be that. It would be that. That would be my punchline. Who betrayed Ariane? Was it one of her conspirators, or did many of her friends betray her? I believe personally it was Tyene. Just given the fact that she is described as being like the most dangerous of the Sand Snakes, and Ariane herself even thinks like she fully trusts Tyene. Tyene knew of this plot. It would make the most amount of sense for it to be her, because the other captors, their motives, in my opinion, don't really add up, in my opinion. But Tyene's does. And it also, if you think about for Ariane narratively, if she finds out that it was Tyene, it would have the most impact on her as a character. Whereas like some of the other conspirators, they're just not as relevant. Like it just wouldn't be as impactful as somebody that was so close to Ariane as Tyene. So I personally think it's Tyene, but I think that would also work even better if we find out that Septa Lemore is actually Tyene's mother, because that would really be interesting, but we'll see. Dakota, thank you for gifting a membership. Michael, welcome to the YouTube members. You get videos early, so enjoy that and all that. I mean, him talking about how he's a bad boy. Oh, God. Yeah, Lord of the Rings is boring as well to me. I tried to get into it, but I just couldn't. So, are you talking about the movies or the books? Because the books, I can see the books being boring way more than I can the movies. Like the movies, like put it this way, Fellowship of the Ring, in my opinion, is the best paced movie of all time. In terms of its pacing, it is the best. The book, however, I still think is really well paced. But if you're somebody that doesn't like, getting a lot of descriptions of the atmosphere of nature, you probably won't like the Lord of the Rings books. I personally love that because it makes me feel like I'm there. Like I feel like I'm a part of the journey. Then there, it builds up everything around you. But I can see it. Even if the ending is mid, it will still be one of the books. It won't be one of the book series of all time. I think you meant to say one of the best book series of all time, but yeah, even if it's mid, the way it would be remembered is similar to Game of Thrones, but just better. Like Game of Thrones is still remembered as one of the greatest TV shows of all time that plummeted to its death. Like, when it was at its peak, it was fantastic. I really want to know what happened to Myrcella. Like, we never get a real resolution to her coronation. I think that's going to be a big part of the next book with Cersei, but also the Dornish plotline. I think we'll get more of that in the next book. When you play the game, you win or you die. That's all I gotta say. That would be another punchline of the channel. Like my intro, that would be a punchline of the channel as well. But I feel like the more iconic one is the one where I just say, "Oh yeah, you can have an opinion, but your opinion can still be wrong." Ghost, no comment. No comment on that. The books, yeah, Ghost. I can see a lot more in the books. I can see in the books people not liking it. Like I think it's much harder to not like the movies than it is the books. The books, like it just some people are not going to like the way the books are told. I think that's a good theory as well. Eris Oakheart betraying her. That would be interesting as well. The only thing I would have against the Eris Oakheart one would be how does that impact Ariane? Like in a meaningful way. Like, yes, this person that she had a fling with, that died horrifically in a lot of ways because of Ariane's actions, also betrayed her. It would still have an impact. And I like it better than a lot of the theories, but I don't know. Yeah, The Silmarillion is a book that I respect, but I don't find to be the most interesting read. Kara, you're breaking my heart. You're breaking my heart. Grease, what do you think is the fate of my dear Lannisters? I think kind of the way the show did it, where Jaime and Cersei are 100% going to die. I think Tyrion will live. I think he'll live. I think he'll be a very changed individual, but I think that he will live. I think likely you'll see some of the minor, like Lannisters, still live. I think the Lannisters will be fine. It's just a lot of the major ones will be killed off. That's fair, Ghost. Now, see me, I grew up with the Lord of the Rings movies and books. Um, I was just one of those kids. Like, I had this really cool toy when I was younger that I wish we still had, because it would be something I would 100% display. But I got it. I think my dad got it for me when it was probably around when Return of the King came out, in that range. But I actually had like Sting, and it would like light up and stuff. It was super cool. But yeah, I was a Lord of the Rings and Star Wars kid growing up, which the prequels were literally made for my generation. So also this is gonna be a great week. I'm putting it into the world. This is gonna be a great week. We're getting Revenge of the Sith in theaters. That's gonna be an amazing experience. The only Star Wars movie I've ever seen in theaters, by the way, Rogue One, which fantastic movie. The only one I've seen in theaters. I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan, and it's the only one I've seen. So that'll be, and Phantom Menace. I saw Phantom Menace last year, or whenever it came into theaters. I don't know. But Revenge of the Sith. We have the NFL draft this week. I'm excited for that. My D&D main session that I've been doing with my friends, we're actually not this week, but the next week after, the next weekend, we're finishing like the first phase. It'd be like if we're completing like the first book. It's pretty cool. But yeah, and that campaign's been going for like 3 years, two maybe 3 years, because of scheduling issues. Boy, the one problem with D&D is scheduling. But yeah. Like many believe there is a curse over Harrenhal. Is there a curse over a Song of Ice and Fire adaptations? We will see. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, I think, will tell us that story. If a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is not good, my last bits of trust of there ever being a good adaptation from HBO is basically gone. I mean, if you can't adapt a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you just can't do it. Duck Knight, I don't know anything about that show. What do you think of my theory that Quaithe never meant Dany to go to Asshai, but rather was referencing the Shadow City of Dorne? I don't know how I feel about it, Ashley. I gotta ponder that, because my question then would be wondering, why does Quaithe want Daenerys to go to Dorne? And maybe if Daenerys was like growing up in Dorne, like her youth was there instead of Braavos, and so that could be a reference to remember who you are, being a Targaryen and all of that stuff. That could have implications. Also, the Dornish going for young Griff. I could see it. Like, as I'm thinking about it and kind of like going through it, I could see that. I could see where you made that theory or found that theory. Grease, what do you prefer? First time reading a book or rereads? So, I mean, to me, it's first time reading a book. I mean, because first time you're going into a whole new experience. You don't know what you're getting into. I haven't read many books lately that are my first time reads outside of the Hunger Games books, both the prequels. I read both within the last 3 to 4 months, and both were fantastic. I really enjoyed reading them. I got through the new Hunger Games book. I have a spoiler-free review I did for a class, and it's, I enjoyed doing it, but I got through that book in like 3 days. I really enjoyed it. But I definitely think reading a book for the first time. Rereads are great for understanding a book more and appreciating it more, or hating it more, whatever you're kind of looking for a reread to do. Like, as a reread, you're looking for something new usually, or as well for me as a channel, as somebody who makes content on it, you're looking at it for some new angle on it. But yeah, I definitely, the first time, of course. Rogue One is the best of the newer Star Wars. Yeah. Rogue One is the best Star Wars movie since Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion. It's probably the best piece of Star Wars content since like the Clone Wars, a TV show, and Revenge of the Sith. I would agree. Revenge has some of the worst dialogue of any movie. Revenge of the Sith, you're right, doesn't have the best dialogue, but its dialogue is meme-worthy, and that makes it good. Also, I will say this. People love to give Hayden Christensen, like, shit and stuff. The man knew how to act. George Lucas didn't know how to write lines. If you look at his performance, especially in Revenge of the Sith, what he's able to do and the emotion he's able to show, he did it the best that he could. So, my favorite NFL team is the Patriots. On the NFC side, it's the Arizona Cardinals. So, we're not in a good spot right now. So, the Patriots, depending on what they do in this draft, I'll feel better. But, I don't know. I think we're still a couple years from the Patriots doing anything, you know. But, yeah. Well, Dakota, you didn't get anybody to get into this members D&D. There was no established people. What reunion are you most looking forward to? Mine is Catelyn and Arya's. I just think that that's gonna have a lot of emotion to it. I think that for Arya, it'll be a big turning point of her arc. I think another one would be Jon and Arya. I just think that's a really good one. But yeah. Was Blood Raven's cameo in House of the Dragon a tease for a future plotline or just a way to hype Dunk and Egg? Unfortunately, I think it is. They're going to connect it. I think that undoubtedly in this next show, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, there's going to be a connection to Blood Raven and probably the Prince that was promised. All stuff that's really not present in Night of the Seven Kingdoms, I think will be in the show. I think that maybe not in the first season, but maybe as we get, you know, Blood Raven we do see him in the third novella. We see, maybe we'll see some stuff there. I just unfortunately think that they have gotten into, HBO, I should say, of this constant, we need to reference Game of Thrones. We need to connect all these shows together. And yeah. Thank you for Ghost for, I think is that remembering? I would assume that was a weird way of phrasing that, but thank you for continuing to be a member, Ghost, and also to you as well, Dakota. Also, I don't know if my settings have it where like memberships get the notification. I think it's just super chats and like donations, but I'm not sure. Hey Grease, glad to make it to a stream. I know people bash Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon a lot, but I'd rather watch mediocre shows than actual ending than waiting a decade plus for updates. Love your channel. Well, thank you for the kind words, and I don't blame you, right? I mean, it's something, right? I'm going to watch House of the Dragon Season 3, even though I have a ton of complaints about it. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm going to cover it because I'm a Song of Ice and Fire channel, for one, and I also want to hope that they can get the show back on track. But I am going to watch it. And Night of the Seven Kingdoms, I have, I think it's going to be good. Do I think it's going to be great? That's still left to be seen. So hopefully it is. I have higher expectations for it than, season 3 of House of the Dragon, of course. And I hope that they do good with the source material. Sounds good, Dvorlin, on that a shy quote. I agree. I do think the main books, when you reread them, you find new things every time. And that's what's just great about them. But it's also because they're super long. So. Hi, Thrawn. How are you? Trying to scroll through here, and I hate that on YouTube, when you're trying to scroll through chats, it like scrolls to the bottom automatically. So if I'm not already caught up with chat, it goes all the way to the bottom, and I gotta go find it. It's a whole process, and this is why Twitch is better for streaming YouTube. So get your act together. Sorry, that was a little bit of a lash out. What are your thoughts on John Aaron as a character? Good, bad, something else? And might be the hand who used the secret tunnels to Chachaya's. I can't say her name. I don't think so. I think it was likely Tywin that was the person, but I will say this. I think John Aaron is a very morally complex character because he does seem to be a good father figure for people like Robert and Ned, but he also, in the same vein, seems like somebody that was not the best hand of the king. Like, I think that he was a good person, but maybe not necessarily the best hand of the king. Kind of the way I view Ned. Like, Ned is not the best person for a hand of the king. It's kind of the way I look at John Aaron. Like, he just wasn't able to rule effectively and also make Robert not destroy the realm, more or less. I agree, Thrawn. I think Natalie Portman's acting is not that great in the prequels. What do you think of Younger's introduction in Dance Dragons? I like where the plotline is now, but I think it is a little clumsy introduction. I agree, James. Like, it doesn't really felt built up to at all. Like, it just kind of feels like it comes out of left field. But I do agree. I think it's more that George didn't think of the character yet, and so is always going to feel like that, but House of the Dragon is meh, but I like how it brings us nerds together to talk every week. Yeah, I agreed. And House of the Dragon, I want it to do well because House of the Dragon brings in more people to the community. It opens up, more conversations with people to start reading the books and things like that. And you can feel that, right? House of the Dragon season 2, even, after the season concluded, my viewership or my interaction with fans and stuff like that was like at its highest. Like, it was at its highest it's ever been on this channel outside of like major Winds of Winter updates and stuff like that. But I want the shows to be good. It's just that usually they're lacking at times, and that's just unfortunate. Yeah, Duck Knight, I think that it started pretty strong, and then I think episodes 7 and 8 just went off a cliff. Have you ever said so I did for a while do Restream, where I did YouTube and Twitch, but I don't know. I just don't really like Restreaming because it's hard to then manage both chats, and it doesn't feel as connected. I would want to do either one or the other, but my community is on YouTube, so I don't really feel like there's a reason to go specifically to Twitch. I think we'll at least see one chapter of Davos and Skagos Mats. I never said he patronized the brawl, but just I utilized the tunnels to pass through it. I had a sneaking suspicion he allowed people to think he patronized them to cover something else. That could be very possible, Ashley. Wouldn't it be interesting if George R. R. Martin decides to revive a character from Fire and Blood or the Duncan Egg novellas in the main story? It could be, yeah. I don't know how he would do that, but it would be interesting, yeah. I'll give you guys a hint. So my character in a lot of ways is a mix of two very prominent A Song of Ice and Fire. Okay. Let me say 3. 2 of them for lore reasons, and then the third one is their actual like fighting ability or like how they are as a class. But yeah, it's very, very heavily based upon 3 different. I've also basically crafted a character that is based almost completely off of Young Griff, so we'll see how that plot line goes. But yeah. It's also weird because my friend's D&D started almost as like a mix of Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, where he wanted it to be a very grounded world where there wasn't much magic outside of just elves, and now there's like everybody has magic and stuff, so it didn't last very long, but yeah. Human fighter / ranger, no. I'll let you guys go for a little while. If you want to guess what my D&D race, class, and who they're actually built off of. I will say, okay, so I'll give you another hint. So the characters they're built off of are all 3 POV characters. They are all pretty main characters within the story. 2 of them are younger characters, and 1 of them is like middle-aged. There you go. Ghost? Maybe. Lewin Martell? No. No. I will say, don't think of any, like, great fighters. He is not built off of great fighters. I'll just put it that way. Oberyn, for one? No. Remember, it has to be a POV character. All 3 are POV characters. I'll even narrow it down even further. All 3 of them are introduced in the first 3 books as POVs. So, there's a character, one of them is based off of Jon. Now, the only reason it's based off of Jon is because I like the bastard wrinkle of Jon's character. That's the only part of it that's built off of Jon's character. Like my D&D character is not built off of Jon's, like his persona or anything like that he believes necessarily, but it's the bastard aspect, is it? Arya, yes. So Arya, the only reason I would say it's based off of Arya is because the character I play is a rogue and is kind of like Arya in a lot of ways, but just actually an assassin, not where like they're like an acolyte of the Faceless Men or whatever. So you have 2 of them. You have the 2 minor ones. The major character that it's built off of, you guys haven't gotten yet. It's a mix of Jon, Arya, because Arya is the like class, and Jon because of a certain part of his background. Jaime, no. Grease likes playing as the butcher's boy in D&D, so I get absolutely smoked. I don't know how I like that. Human, fighter, rogue, Jon, Arya, the Hound. You're getting closer. So you have rogue, Jon, and Arya right. Daenerys. No. I was kind of thinking about it for a second. I was like, is there any Daenerys in that character? No. Come on, guys. You're so close. You're so close. You're so close. Okay, let me limit it down even more. It's a POV character that's in book 1. That's your hint. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, why are we going off on a D&D tangent? Well, because it's funny. It's funny to see you guys try and guess it. Tyrion, that's it, Mats. So the character is a halfling. So right away, you kind of get where that's coming from. The name is kind of built off of a Lannister character. So it's named Tyget. And then he's a bastard from a house that is that's not the Lannister equivalent. It would be like, I would say, the Riverlands equivalent. So I'm a bastard of like a major house. That house is then gone extinct. But the basis premise of like my character is kind of like Tyrion, like very morally gray type character mixed with an like assassin type character with being a bastard. That's more or less the gist of it. The whole D&D arc right now for my guy, trying to restore my family to their previous position. That's where the young Griff character comes in. Young Griff's going to be the guy we prop up. So, yeah. So that is what I wanted to talk about in today's stream. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll be back with some videos this week. All of them are kind of more shorter type videos, but I kind of like it that way because then they'll be more edited for you guys. Hopefully they're a bit more enjoyable. And I hope you guys all enjoyed the stream. And I will see you guys in the next stream. Bye, guys.